It was around 6 in the morning when I opened the door of my lonely house in the Adirondack Mountains and breathed in the crisp forest air, scented with pine and morning dew. I, Aidan Brody, a former journalist turned aspiring writer, wasn't fully awake yet. I had just stepped outside in my worn flannel shirt and boots, yawning and dreaming of a strong coffee to kickstart yet another day of my self-imposed isolation in the wild. And then I froze, as if struck by lightning, because just a few steps away stood a massive black bear. Its presence seemed to fill the space around me, making the air feel dense and unmoving. The animal didn't move, didn't growl, showed no signs of aggression. It simply stood there on my porch, breathing heavily, trembling all over, its fur tangled and wet, as if it had just emerged from a raging river or a vicious battle with some unknown foe. What struck me most were the bear's eyes, dark, moist, almost human, and they genuinely looked like they were crying. Tears streamed down its face like a broken tap. I had never seen a wild animal truly weep before, and the sight went straight to my heart, making me forget all fear of this powerful creature that could have crushed my skull with a single swipe of its paw. And only then did I realize the bear was holding a lifeless cub in its mouth, its legs dangling loosely, its head tilted to the side like a rag doll dropped by a careless child. In that moment, I saw not a bear, but a mother mourning her dying baby. I felt the urge to slam the door and grab the old rifle hanging on the kitchen wall, a natural reaction to finding a wild animal at my doorstep. But something in her posture, in that silent maternal desperation, stopped me. This wasn't a threat. This was a mother on the brink of a tragedy too deep to name. My heart thundered so loudly I feared it might burst through my ribs, and I slowly backed away, never taking my eyes off the bear. To my horror, she followed me with a few cautious steps and then, with an almost human gentleness, laid her cub down on the wooden porch floor. Then she sat back on her hind legs and stared at me, unblinking, as if waiting for something I had yet to understand. Against all survival instincts, against every bear attack story I'd ever heard, against every park ranger's warning, I fell to my knees before the motionless cub. It looked so small, no larger than a medium-sized cocker spaniel, with protruding ribs and dried blood on one ear. Just when I was certain it was gone, its chest moved, a tiny contraction, so faint I'd have missed it if I hadn't been looking closely. I glanced at the mother bear, who still watched me with that strange, deliberate look of hope, and the words left my mouth before I had time to think, "I'll try, okay? I'll try to help him." The bear didn't move, as if she understood every word. My heart threatened to explode as I gently wrapped the trembling cub in my flannel shirt and slowly, without sudden movements, carried him inside. I expected a growl, an attack at any moment, but the bear simply sat there, as if she knew something I didn't. I grabbed what I could, towels, a heating pad, water bottles, acting more on instinct than knowledge. Through the window, I saw the mother still sitting there, a motionless shadow, her eyes locked on my house. The cub was cold to the touch, limp, but not entirely gone, and I stood in the middle of my living room holding this tiny, nearly lifeless creature and thought, what the hell do I do now? In that moment, I realized this wasn't just a strange encounter with wildlife or a twist of fate. This was something else, something that had chosen me despite all the laws of nature and common sense. I wasn't ready for this responsibility, no way, but the mother bear was. She had decided to trust me, and she stayed, calmly waiting at the edge of my property, watching over my house all day while I tried to save her cub, who seemed determined not to leave this world without a fight. The cub lay on my sofa between towels, motionless and cold. I knelt and gently pressed 2 fingers to its tiny ribs, searching for a pulse or any sign of breath. Feeling nothing, I held my own breath and leaned close enough to smell the earthy scent of wet fur mixed with the metallic tang of blood. And then, I felt it. The faint rise and fall of its chest. A weak but real breath that made me exhale in relief. "You're alive, little one. You're still here with us." I wrapped him tighter in my flannel shirt and rushed to the back room, where I found an old heater. I turned it up full blast and gathered every soft item I could. Blankets, towels, cushions, creating a kind of warm nest for my tiny patient. His breathing was shallow, his chest barely moving, and one of his back legs seemed oddly stiff, as if it were broken or paralyzed. Dried blood had crusted around one ear, and it became clear that this wasn't just exhaustion or weakness. Something serious had happened to him. I heard scratching outside and looked through the window. The mother bear was still there, sitting like an ancient statue, patiently watching the house where her baby lay. I grabbed my phone and rang Rachel Kowalski, the nearest vet I knew, though she usually dealt with farm animals. "Rachel, it's me, Aiden. I've got a bear cub in my house. He's injured, badly. The mother brought him to me and left him on my porch. She's still outside." There was a long, doubtful pause before she finally said, "Aiden, are you sure you haven't been drinking?" "No, damn it. I'm serious and I don't have time to explain. What do I do to keep him alive?" After another pause, she sighed and began giving me clear instructions. "Keep him warm. Check for any open bleeding. No solid food yet, only fluids. You can make a mix of honey and warm water. Give it to him drop by drop. I'll call Ginny. She used to work at a wildlife rehab center. Hang tight. We'll be there soon." I hung up and went to the kitchen, found an old bottle of raw honey, mixed it with warm water, and, using a darning syringe, the closest thing I had to a pipette, I carefully opened the cub's mouth and let a few drops trickle in. At first, no reaction. But after a few tries, his tiny tongue stirred slightly, and I felt a flicker of hope. "That's it, little fighter. Stay with me." I sat beside him for over an hour, talking, humming, sometimes cursing softly in helplessness, while the mother bear remained silent outside. I cracked the door just a bit and she lifted her head, looked me in the eyes, and lowered it again. That simple gesture said something so unexpected, so full of understanding. I still remember it vividly and wonder how a wild animal overcame its fear of a human. Around midday, the cub twitched a paw for the first time, just a little, slowly, as if testing if the muscles still worked. I laughed out loud with relief, not even noticing the tears that streamed down my face. "You're not dying today, little one." "Not on my watch," I whispered, though inside I was panicking, knowing full well I was just a writer with a few towels and a heater trying to save a wild animal I knew nothing about. By midday, my living room looked like a makeshift animal hospital. Blankets everywhere, towels piled up, the heater blasting at full power, and the bear cub lying right in front of it, bundled like a newborn baby, one little paw sticking out. The wound on his leg had started to bleed again, and when I examined it closely, it looked like a bite mark, swollen, red, and clearly infected, which could kill him faster than the cold or exhaustion. I grabbed some hydrogen peroxide, the kind I usually used on cuts of my own, soaked a cloth in it, and gently dabbed at the wound. The cub flinched, and strangely, I was glad. The pain meant he was still fighting, his nervous system still working. There was a low growl outside, and I looked out the window again. The mother bear hadn't moved an inch. She was still sitting there, her massive body completely still, but her eyes followed every movement inside my home. I opened the door just a crack and whispered, "He's still with us, barely, but he's holding on." Of course, she didn't respond, didn't growl. She just breathed deeply, as if she understood what I meant. I went back inside and sat beside the cub on the floor. I gave him more honey water, and this time his tongue moved more clearly, trying to lick the sweet liquid. Small, but undeniable progress. My phone rang. It was Rachel again. "Ginny says you're mad," she said, "but she'll come with some medicine. She'll be with you in a few hours." Thank God. His leg's bleeding, it looks like a bite, and I think he's running a fever, I told her quickly. "Keep him warm, don't make any sudden movements. Keep giving him fluids, and for heaven's sake, don't open that door. That mother bear won't stay calm forever." Rachel warned me, and I knew she was right. It was a miracle the mother hadn't torn down the walls of my house looking for her baby. But for some reason, she trusted me. And that made me even more nervous. 1 hour passed, then another. The cub began to shift, trying to roll over, and I whispered softly to him, "Easy, mate, not yet, just rest." Then he made a strange noise, not a growl, not a whimper, something in between, like a broken toy slowly coming back to life. I carefully cleaned his leg again. The bleeding had stopped, the wound still red and swollen, but not as dangerous looking anymore. I could work with that. Outside, the mother bear showed concern for the first time. She paced back and forth a few steps, as if undecided about staying or going, then sat down again in her old spot. I lit the wood stove to warm the house even more, though it was already stuffy to me. The cub needed the heat more than I needed the fresh air. As night fell, shadows shifted, and then a small miracle. The cub opened one eye, just one, and looked straight at me. There was no wildness in that gaze, no fear, only awareness, as if he saw me and somehow understood who I was. "You're not alone anymore, little one," I whispered, feeling a strange warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the heater. He blinked, then went back to sleep, but for the first time that day, I believed he might actually make it. Not a guarantee, not a promise, but a chance I didn't have that morning. When Rachel and Ginny, the wildlife specialist, finally arrived, the sun had already set. The mother bear retreated into the shadows of the forest but didn't leave. She still watched the house from a safe distance. "Oh my God, this wasn't a joke," Rachel breathed when she saw the cub, and Ginny immediately got to work, examining him with a trained, professional eye. "This is a bite from an adult male," she said after a careful inspection. Sometimes male bears kill other cubs to force the female back into heat. This little one was lucky his mother managed to rescue him and bring him to you. It's incredible she chose a human. Maybe she was watching you before making such a desperate move. That thought gave me chills. The idea that a wild animal might have been observing and judging me before trusting me with what she valued most. Ginny and Rachel spent several hours treating the wounds, administering antibiotics, and rehydrating the cub's frail body. When they left, his breathing was more even, and his leg had been properly bandaged. "We're leaving you some medicine and instructions," Ginny said, packing her things. "But once he's better, you'll have to return him to the wild. He can't stay with you forever, Aiden." I nodded, though deep down, I already felt how attached I'd become to this little creature who had fought so hard for his life right before my eyes. In the 2 weeks that followed, the cub recovered surprisingly fast. His wounds healed, his appetite returned, and he began exploring his surroundings with growing curiosity, roaming through my house with more and more confidence. I named him Baxter, simply because it felt right. Even though I knew I shouldn't name a wild animal, shouldn't grow fond of someone who would soon need to return to where he belonged. The mother bear came back every day, sometimes closer to the house, but mostly watching from a distance, always alert, always on guard. I left food out for her, which she sometimes accepted and sometimes ignored, as if unwilling to rely on human help more than absolutely necessary. One day, while Baxter was roaming the house confidently, playing and even trying to climb the furniture, I received an unexpected visit from Deputy Louise Gentry. "Aiden, I've heard you've got a bear cub with you, and that his mother's taken up residence on your property," she said, getting straight to the point while standing exactly where the mother bear had stood 2 weeks earlier with her cub in her mouth. I didn't try to deny the obvious. I told her the whole story. She listened with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she simply said, "You're lucky no one got hurt. But this is a problem, Aiden. Animal control already knows. They're planning to come in 3 days to collect the cub, and possibly relocate the mother too. I can delay them a bit, but it's your decision. You have to do something." That night, I couldn't sleep. I watched Baxter curl up in his blanket nest, so warm, so safe, and so completely out of place for a wild animal. I knew I couldn't keep him here forever, couldn't treat him like a pet, couldn't rob him of his chance to be what he was born to be. A free bear in the Adirondack forest. And yet the thought of letting him go hurt like hell, like tearing a piece of myself away. By morning, I had made my decision. I didn't want to wait for the wildlife authorities to arrive. I didn't want to risk the mother bear being relocated, or worse. I didn't want this to end in bureaucracy and cages. I carefully placed Baxter into a large container lined with his familiar blankets. I added his favorite toy, an old tennis ball, and packed a little food for the journey. Then I got into the car and drove deep into the forest, to a spot I thought might be near the mother's den. I drove slowly along the woodland trails, watching closely for any sign of bear activity, until I reached a small clearing surrounded by thick fir trees. I parked, stepped out, and opened the container. Baxter squinted at the bright light and sniffed the familiar scents of the forest. "This is your real home, little one," I said, a lump forming in my throat. I stepped back to give him space to come out and look around on his own. He took a few hesitant steps, then stopped and looked at me as if to ask what was happening, why we were here. And then we both heard the sound of branches cracking. The mother bear was watching us from the edge of the clearing. She looked cautious, but not angry. Our eyes met, and in hers I saw again that strange awareness I had seen on the very first day. Slowly, I stepped back even farther to show her I meant no harm, that I was releasing her cub and giving him back to the world he belonged to. Baxter froze and looked between me and his mother, as if torn between two worlds, between trust and instinct, between human warmth and the call of the wild. The mother bear made a low noise, a mix between a growl and a purr, and the cub turned towards her. He took a few unsure steps, then stopped, then a few more. My heart threatened to break as I watched the distance between them close, the bond of a mother reuniting two creatures separated by cruelty and chance. When they were nearly nose to nose, Baxter suddenly turned and ran back to me, pressing his little face into my knees, as if to say goodbye, or perhaps to thank me. I knelt down and let myself stroke his soft fur one last time, whispering words he couldn't understand but maybe could feel. "Go live your life, brave little one. You'll be all right." Then I gently nudged him towards his mother, and this time he didn't hesitate. With tiny, bouncing steps, he reached her. She sniffed him carefully from head to paw, as if to make sure he was really all right, that he was really her cub, alive and safe. And then something happened I didn't expect. The mother bear raised her head and looked directly at me. And to my surprise, she nodded slightly before turning away and walking slowly into the forest, her cub leading the way, who glanced back only once before disappearing forever among the trees. I stood in that clearing for a long time, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and peace, of loss and resolution. As if I had just finished the final chapter of a book I never meant to write, but that had changed me forever. I returned to my empty house, which now felt far too quiet, too spacious, without the little brown whirlwind that had turned everything upside down. I gathered the blankets, the toys, the bowls, every trace of Baxter's stay, and placed them in a box, which I carried up to the attic, knowing full well I wouldn't need them again, but also unable to part with them. Months passed. I returned to my usual routine. I wrote my book, hiked through the forest, and enjoyed the silence. But sometimes, especially at dusk, I'd go out to the porch with a cup of tea and look towards the tree line, knowing that somewhere out there, in the woods, lived a bear cub who had once slept on my sofa and drunk honey from my hand. And then, one autumn morning, I stepped out the door and saw a small gift on the porch. A bundle of ripe wild berries, carefully placed in a neat little pile, as if someone had gone to the trouble of gathering them. No one was around, but I knew who had done it. I smiled and looked out towards the forest, where I thought I saw a flickering shadow, perhaps just a trick of the light, or perhaps it was the mother and her cubs who had once been a part of my life, letting me know they were well, that they remembered. Since then, every autumn, as the leaves begin to change, I find small gifts on my porch, red berries, pine cones, once even a beautiful smooth stone, as if someone is still trying to say, "We're still here." We remember. We're grateful. And it reminds me that the most important encounters in our lives often come without warning, and the deepest connections arise in moments we least expect. Now that I'm writing my book, I often think of the mother bear who entrusted me with what she held most dear, and the cub who taught me that love sometimes means having the strength to let go. In a world where the line between wild and tame seems so clearly drawn, they reminded me that compassion knows no boundaries, and that trust can be born in the most unexpected places, powerful enough to overcome fear and prejudice. And when visitors ask about the little wooden bear statue on my shelf, I smile and say it's just a souvenir from the Adirondacks. But to me, it's more, a reminder of those few weeks when my home became a refuge for a wild creature, and I became, even if only for a short while, the guardian of a life I was never meant to keep, only to protect, before returning it to its rightful place, the endless forest and the mother who never stopped waiting. And that was yet another story reminding us how life can be just as unpredictable as it is extraordinary. If your heart was racing or you found yourself thinking, did that really happen? Give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next story that'll leave you speechless. Got an unbelievable story to share? Drop it in the comments. Your tale might just be the next jaw-dropping story we bring to life here. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell to receive notifications. Thank you for watching, and until the next unexpected twist.